Welcome back. It's been a while since my last video here, and if you were wondering why, well, I had a lot of cleanup to do before I could start making videos again. And I took advantage of it to restructure my little studio. Let me know what you think, if you think that this new setup is better, or if you prefer the previous one. Anyways, enough with that. Let's focus on the new Fuji 18mm F1.4. As you probably know, I already published a first impression video a few months ago, and you will find it over here, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Otherwise, it's here. And so I kind of discussed a little bit on this lens, but of course, this is going to be the full review, and this is where we're gonna talk about everything about this lens. In my first impression video, I was really impressed about the quality of this lens, and I was looking forward to test it and use it a lot more, just to make sure that my first impressions were confirmed during my everyday use. And one thing that brought this review to drag and take a long time is that I was supposed to go to Lapland at the beginning of January, and I was planning on adding a few Northern Lights shots and tests just to add to the review, but I had to postpone it, and I don't even know if that's gonna happen, so I'm crossing my fingers, but I couldn't wait anymore to push the review out. When it comes to build quality, we all know that the top-of-the-line lenses from Fuji are built really well. This is all metal. It feels good in the end. The focusing ring is well dampened, even though I find that the way it works, and we'll talk about it later, the way it works is not as smooth as the ring is. Weird, but again, we'll talk about it later. And in general, the lens gives you very good feelings. You know that this lens is not gonna let you down from this point of view. The aperture ring is good. It is stiff enough, even though, as I often say, I would prefer for it to be a little bit stiffer, because sometimes I end up changing the aperture even when I don't want it. But again, minor complaint here. I'm getting used to it. But again, if I'm reviewing the lens, I'm going to tell you what I think. The lens is weather resistant. It weighs 370 grams, and even though this is a little bit more than we used to with Fujifilm lenses, it is not too much. It still feels well balanced on an X-T4, and it's slightly front heavy on the X-E4, especially if you're not using any additional grip that would help you balancing the camera. But again, nothing to worry about. It works perfectly even with the XS10, the XS10 has that grip that helps a lot. But in general, it is a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier than we're used to, but it's not a big deal. The construction is super good, is durable, it is full metal again, and again, nothing to complain here. When it comes to the autofocus, we always have to split the conversation between stills and video. When it comes to stills, the autofocus is super good. Like, it never lets you down. It's fast, it's silent, it is accurate, it is all of the best things that you can think of. And if there's sometimes you miss the shot, I would never say it is the lens's fault. It is probably the camera's fault. Because, as you know, Fujifilm's autofocus is good, but it's not as good as the competition, and we're waiting for them to just make it better. Fuji, just make it better. But in general, this lens is super good. And we'll talk about video in a bit, but I was really happy with the autofocus, because even though I cannot show you these pictures, I was shooting kids' parties several kids' parties. And as you probably know, when kids are playing, there's no chance they're gonna stand still. If you wanna take a picture of them, you need to chase them and you need to do miracles to have a decent picture. And with this lens, I was able to get a decent amount of keeper. Of course, not 100% of keepers, but 100% is impossible with any lens that I can think of. So, but in general, really, really, really good. When it comes to still, it is really good, even in continuous autofocus. Image quality is what makes the lens worth being purchased or not. At the end of the day, the image quality is what drives our purchase. And this lens doesn't disappoint at all. Actually, it is beyond impressive. Once you see what this lens can do, it's going to be hard to go back to other lenses. It's that good. It's really that good. But let's talk about it in details. When it comes to sharpness, even when it's wide open at 1.4, the center is tack sharp, and the corners, they fall a little bit behind, but I mean a little bit. You can consider them to be sharp anyways. There's a substantial amount of vignetting. This is the only shortcoming of this lens when it's wide open, but it's something to be expected. It's a wide-angle lens. It's 1.4. I haven't seen lenses that wide open, especially so wide, don't have any vignetting. And the good thing is you can get rid of it pretty easily. When you go to when you go to f2, sorry, the corners become almost perfect. There's a little bit of improvement in the center, but the center was already starting super strong at 1.4, so there's not much you can improve. There's a little bit of improvement, but not so much. The lens is already almost perfect at f2. There's still a little bit of vignetting, but not too much. And when you get to f2.8, the lens is absolutely perfect. Corner to corner, the center, no vignetting. It's incredibly good, and this keeps being consistent up until f8. When you go to f11, you start seeing diffraction kicks in, and when you go to f16, the diffraction, it's even stronger. Now, despite the diffraction being visible, it doesn't destroy your picture. This lens is still usable at f16, which is not something you would expect with an f1.4 lens. When it comes to distortions, of course there's distortion correction embedded in the profile, but even if you turn that off, the distortion is basically negligible. There's no distortions at all, and I guess this is one of the reasons why the lens is also perfect at the corners, because it's not stretching it to correct the distortion, which it happens in other lenses. The lens is really good, basically no distortions at all. Of course, bear in mind it's a wide angle. If you tilt it up or down, you're gonna have perspective distortion, but that's a whole different story. It doesn't have to do with the lens itself. It has to do with the focal length and the perspective that you change. Close-up capabilities are really nice. Now, the 16mm f1.4 was famous for this because you could focus super close-up, and it will get you that like super wide, not super wide, but very wide field of view with a strong separation between the foreground and the background. The 18-1.4 doesn't get as close as the 16, and it's not as wide as the 16, but its close-up focusing capabilities are still really good. You can still get decent pictures that are pleasing to the eye and get you that perspective that sometimes we want to use. Of course, don't use it for super close-up portraits, because the nose of the person you're gonna shoot is gonna become huge. But I guess you know that. The bokeh on this lens is really good, it's very pleasing. Even when there's a little bit of a nervous background, it makes it smooth. It's not the smoothest of the world, but it's really smooth, it's very usable, and you can use it without thinking about, oh, in this situation the bokeh is gonna look bad. No, it is good, and it's consistently good regardless of the situation you're in. So I really like it. And even the progression is nice between autofocus and in focus. It's really nice. As already mentioned in my first impression videos, the sunstar effect when you stop down the lens and you have a strong light source in the picture is really nice. It starts being visible very early, I guess 5-6. You can start seeing it, and it becomes perfect between f8 and f11. It is incredibly defined, it is very usable, it is spectacular. Of course, on the other hand, if you don't like this kind of effect, well, this lens is not for you, because it is strong, it is distinctive, and you definitely see it. So if it's not your cup of tea, don't buy this lens, because this is something you're not gonna change afterwards. There's no post-production to get rid of this, at least not easy post-production for this. Usually when you have wide-angle lenses that are also super fast, you end up having issues when it comes to strong contrasty area, so like your usual chromatic aberration, which this lens does not show. It is incredibly good. It manages to keep them well under control, as well as the lateral longitudinal chromatic aberration, which means the slight difference of hue that you get in the contrast area when they're in focus in front, when they're out of focus in front of the lens or behind the lens. This lens does not show any visible sign of that, and even ghosting and flaring are well under control. It is an impressive performance on this lens. Bottom line, Fuji did an incredible work with the design of this lens, because I'm not saying it doesn't have shortcomings, but those that you have are really negligible, and when you're shooting in normal conditions, this lens is the closest to perfection that I've ever seen. It is that good. I keep saying that. It is that good. Bought this lens mainly for video, and I mentioned that in my first impression video, but I ended up using it also a lot for pictures. But focusing on video, this lens is really good. The footage you get out of it, it is nice, it is pleasing, it is smooth, it is everything you would want when you're shooting a video. It is really nice, and I started using this lens even in conditions that I would not expect to use them. Now, I bought this lens together with the 33 because I wanted to have a couple of super nice lenses for my both photography and video shooting when I want to get a little bit more character out of a lens. And this lens does not disappoint. When it comes to video, the only thing that I think is worth mentioning as shortcoming is that there's a little bit of focus breathing, which means that when you focusing to infinity and then you're focusing close, you see that the lens zooms in or out depending on what you're doing a little bit. Anyways, this is not too bad. It is still usable, and it only shows when you're doing like minimum to infinity. If you're in a decent range where you usually are when you're shooting, it's not as visible. Besides that, however, the lens performs really good. The focus transition is super smooth, even though, as we all know, Fuji is not perfect when it comes to focus tracking. So I would not, again, as I already mentioned, I would not give the lens the responsibility of some missed focus when you're shooting in continuous autofocus. I would say that it's more a camera's fault. But in general, the lens follows you really nicely and the transitions are very smooth. It all depends on the setting on your camera, of course, but in general, it's not jumpy. What is jumpy, which is weird, is that if you want to pull focus manually, I don't know why the focusing ring, which feels really smooth in the end, it doesn't translate in a smooth movement in the focusing motor. We all know it's fly-by-wire, so it's not directly connected. But for a lens that was born in 2021, when Fuji was already committed to video a lot, I would have expected this to be a little bit better, because it doesn't allow you to rely on your manual focus, because I have never, I tried, but I've never been able to perform a push focus manually that was smooth. So you need to rely on the autofocus with this. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. Other than that, this lens is great. When it comes to vlogging, of course, the focal length is not the best one. It's a little bit too tight. But considering how good this lens is, it almost asks you to be used for vlogging. And if you're vlogging on your own, like you're alone and you don't necessarily need to show too much of the background, this lens has a look that is incredible for vlogging. So of course it's not your vlogging lens, but if Fuji could make a lens with the same image quality that sits in between the 12 to 14 range, that would be a dream lens for any vlogger, because the image quality you get out of this lens is incredible, and if with the right focal length and same characteristic, it would be a dream. In conclusion, as you probably guessed, I love this lens, and I can only say that this lens is nothing short of spectacular. There's minor issues here and there, I mentioned those, but none of those are showstoppers. They're all, again, negligible issue in a lens that performs in a way that I did not expect. It is hard to convey in video, but once you've tried this lens, you realize why Fuji told us that these lenses are ready for the next generation of sensor, which is going to be more dense. The crispness, the detail that you get out of this lens is incredible. Little story, I usually, when I edit in Capture One, I tend to, when I'm editing the RAW, I tend to slide a little bit of sharpness in the picture at the end of my edit. With this lens, sometimes I have to bring it down. This is how sharp it is. Like, it's super sharp. But it's not only sharp, it is nice in all of other aspects. It's basically almost flawless. And yes, it costs $1,000 or €1,000, close to that. But when you think about the quality that this lens gives you, I can tell you that I'm not saying that the lens is a bargain itself, but the price is more than justified by the quality of this lens. For comparison, the closest comparison to this lens would be the 16 1.4, which we have all praised for its qualities. I've used the 16 for a long time with great results, and I've always been super pleased with that lens. Then I sold it because I was not using it anymore. I was changing my way of photography, and it was sitting taking dust. But I remember shooting that lens, and I remember the sensation that I had while I was shooting, which was, oh man, I love this lens. Well, this 18-1.4 blows the 16-1.4 out of the water. And I would never expect to be able to say that. And I know someone's gonna feel offended by this, but trust me, once you test this lens, you realize how good it is. I think I told you all of the things that I think about this lens. I think it went longer than I expected, but I guess this lens deserved this kind of video. That's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below if you want a specific test against the 16-1.4, because I don't have that lens anymore, but I can find it, so I can build that kind of video if there's some interest. So let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, leave me a thumbs up and share the video with all the people that may be interested in it. That's it. Ciao, and I'll see you in the next one.